When pirates entered restricted space, they couldn't believe their eyes. Best HFY stories. The Black Scorpion, a notorious pirate vessel, lurked in the void at the edge of known space, waiting for its next target. Led by Captain Core, a ruthless but cunning leader, the crew was always on the lookout for the next big score. Their primary goal was simple: plunder, pillage, and escape before the authorities could respond. But today, their target was different, something they had never expected to find. "Captain," came the gruff voice of First Mate Zoran over the intercom. "We've found it. The restricted zone." Core's sharp gaze fixed on the holographic map in front of him. The area marked in red was one of the few remaining regions in the galaxy that even the most seasoned pirates avoided. Legends spoke of the space being guarded by fleets and containing technologies far beyond anything the average pirate could handle. But Core was not an ordinary pirate. He thrived on taking risks that others wouldn't dare. "Set a course, Zoran. We're going in." The crew muttered amongst themselves. The rumors were everywhere: strange ships that moved without engines, defenses that could obliterate entire fleets with a single shot, and most notably, the presence of humans. Core had heard whispers in the underworld. Humans. The Federation had brought them in from another galaxy, and their rise had been nothing short of meteoric. They were fierce, relentless, and cunning, and they were said to be the ones protecting the restricted zones. If those stories were true, then this was a gamble like no other. As the Black Scorpion crossed into the restricted zone, the atmosphere on board shifted. It felt wrong. The usual hum of the ship's engines seemed muted, and an eerie silence settled over the crew. Zoran glanced nervously at Core. "We're in. Now what?" Core leaned forward, staring at the sensors. Nothing. No fleets. No defenses. No ships at all. Just empty space. It didn't make sense. The legends said this was the heart of the Federation's most powerful secrets, but all they saw were abandoned wrecks floating in the void. Then, they saw it. A massive structure appeared from behind a nebula, one that defied everything they knew about space engineering. It was colossal, its surface gleaming with an unnatural shine. The Black Scorpion was nothing in comparison. This wasn't some starship. This was a fortress. As they drew closer, an energy pulse shot from the structure. The ship rattled as if struck by a thunderstorm. The crew scrambled to stabilize, but nothing worked. The pulse surged again, and the ship was dragged inexorably toward the unknown behemoth. "Captain, we're being pulled in." Zoran's voice cut off abruptly. Core clenched his teeth. He'd underestimated this place, and now, they were caught. Before he could issue orders, something even more unexpected happened. A ship appeared before them, seemingly materializing out of thin air. It was sleek, compact, and terrifyingly efficient. No visible weapons, no thrusters, just sheer presence. And the figures aboard it, they were human. Captain Core's eyes widened. The humans he had heard of were a myth, a story told by old pirates who never returned. They were supposed to be nothing more than a dangerous legend. But now, as the humans boarded the Black Scorpion with a cold and practiced efficiency, Core realized the truth. These humans weren't just guarding the restricted zone, they owned it. "You ventured into the heart of the Federation's most dangerous secret," one of the humans said, her voice calm but laced with authority. "And for that, you will be given a choice: leave, or face the consequences." Core swallowed hard. His entire crew was in shock, staring at the humans, who were effortlessly overpowering them. "Leave?" Core scoffed, his voice strained but defiant. "We came for treasure, not to run." The human leader smiled. "You will soon understand that the treasure here is nothing like what you expected. You cannot fathom the cost of your arrogance." Before he could respond, a wave of energy rippled from the human's ship, sweeping through the Black Scorpion like a storm. Core tried to resist, but his body was suddenly weak, as if drained by an unseen force. His crew collapsed around him, helpless. "Humans," Core gasped, his voice filled with disbelief. "What are you?" "We are the Federation's ultimate guardians," the leader said, her tone cold and final. "And you are the last pirates to make this mistake." The crew, now completely subdued, was escorted away. Core's heart pounded in his chest as the realization settled in. The legends weren't stories. The humans weren't just another race, they were something far more advanced. and they had the power to control not just the galaxy, but the very fabric of space itself. As they were led to a prison cell aboard the Federation's ship, Kor dared to glance out into the vast expanse of the restricted zone, and for the first time in his life, he truly understood the meaning of the word outmatched. The humans were no longer just a myth, they were a force, and they had only just begun to show what they were capable of. The Black Scorpion's crew, once feared across the galaxy, had entered restricted space, and now, they would never leave. When pirates entered restricted space, they couldn't believe their eyes. Best HFY Stories, Part 2. Days passed. Though time felt distorted in the sterile cells aboard the Federation ship, Captain Kor paced the length of the small, featureless room, his mind racing, his crew, subdued and broken, huddled in silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. The weight of their capture had settled on them like a suffocating fog. Kor, once the untouchable terror of the Outer Rim, felt a foreign sensation he hadn't known in years: the sphere. Not the usual adrenaline-fueled dread of a close call or a firefight, but the deep, gnawing kind that came from realizing he had underestimated an enemy beyond his comprehension. The humans, the Federation. They weren't just a government, a species, or even a military. They were something else. Through the thin walls of the prison cell, Kor could hear the quiet hum of advanced machinery. He knew that whatever lay behind those walls was more than just technology. It was the key to the power he had witnessed firsthand. The human ships, their weapons, their mind-bending control over the very fabric of space. This was no ordinary civilization. Suddenly, the door to his cell slid open, and the same woman who had spoken to him earlier stepped inside. She wasn't alone. Beside her, a tall man with eyes that shimmered with an unnatural intensity stood, silent but intimidating. Kor straightened his back instinctively, but he knew it was futile. There was no pride left in him to cling to. These people were beyond anything he had ever faced. "You've been quiet," the woman said, her voice still cold, but with a trace of something more, perhaps pity, perhaps amusement. "I expected more resistance." Kor sneered, forcing out words through gritted teeth. "Resistance? You call this a prison? A few days in a cage and you think you've won?" She tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing. "We haven't even begun. You think you've been captured? No, Captain, you've been chosen." "Chosen?" Kor's laugh was bitter. "Chosen for what? To be experimented on like one of your lab rats?" The woman's expression didn't shift. Instead, she stepped closer, and for the first time, Kor felt a strange wave of pressure in the air, something subtle but unmistakable. The man beside her took a step forward, and Kor felt a knot tighten in his chest. It was like the gravity in the room had shifted. Or perhaps, like the very fabric of his reality was being manipulated. "You're mistaken," the woman replied, her gaze piercing into him. "We didn't capture you because you're a threat, Captain. We captured you because you're a lesson. The Federation doesn't conquer by force alone. We conquer through understanding, through knowledge, through unity." "Unity?" Kor mocked. "Is that what you call it? The galaxy bowing to your will?" The woman's eyes softened ever so slightly, and she spoke in a tone that Kor could almost consider compassionate. "You call it that because you don't understand. You came here for treasure, but treasure is fleeting. Power is fleeting. What we offer is something more. What you've encountered is a reality-shattering truth, and it's only the beginning." Kor blinked, trying to steady his thoughts. "What are you talking about? Your technology? Your weapons?" She shook her head, her voice turning distant as if recalling something ancient. "The Federation didn't conquer the stars through weapons, Captain. Our true power lies in what we've learned. The truths of the universe, how space bends, how time twists, how consciousness can touch the infinite. These secrets are why we protect this place, why we protect you." "You're insane," Kor spat, but his mind churned. There was something behind her words, something that made him feel small, insignificant. "Not insane," the woman replied, with a faint, knowing smile. "Just enlightened. Your kind has only ever seen the surface, but you can't see the depths of the ocean until you dive in." The man beside her suddenly moved, and Kor's chest tightened once more. The pressure in the air intensified, but this time it wasn't just physical, it was mental, as if an invisible hand was squeezing his mind. His thoughts were muddled, his vision blurry, and he felt himself being pulled in several directions at once. You have a choice now. The woman continued. You can return to the stars, to your life as a pirate, where you will continue to see the universe through a veil of greed and violence. Or, you can choose to learn, to see, to understand the truths that the Federation has unlocked. Kor staggered, his knees buckling slightly as the pressure faded. He breathed heavily, trying to clear the fog from his mind. I'm not some pawn of yours, he growled. The woman didn't flinch. No, you're not a pawn, but you are something more than you realize. You will either rise to meet the truth, or the universe will leave you behind. She turned to leave, and the man followed silently, his presence lingering long after they were gone. The door slid shut with a final, echoing sound. Kor stood in the center of the cell, his head spinning. The weight of her words pressed on him like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its intensity. He had been a pirate all his life, had taken what he wanted, when he wanted, but now, he felt like he was staring into an abyss, not of space, but of knowledge. And something deep inside him stirred, a flicker of curiosity. For the first time, Kor wasn't sure whether he had walked into the lion's den, or the first step towards something that would change everything. When pirates entered restricted space, they couldn't believe their eyes. Best HFY Stories, Part 3. Captain Kor sat in the silence of his cell, wrestling with his thoughts. The woman's words replayed in his mind like an endless loop, each one more unsettling than the last. You will either rise to meet the truth, or the universe will leave you behind. The weight of that sentence hung over him like a shadow, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she had been right. He had always believed that power came from force, strength, fear, control, but now, in this cold, sterile cell, he couldn't help but wonder if that was just a fleeting illusion. He had seen things, experienced things. The technology in this Federation was far beyond anything his crew had ever encountered, and the humans themselves, they were unlike any race he had ever crossed paths with. Kor had spent his entire life running, raiding, and conquering. He had built a reputation that made other pirates tremble in fear. But now, he was trapped, caught by an enemy whose motives he didn't understand, and it scared him. Minutes, maybe hours, passed before the door to his cell opened again. This time, it wasn't the woman or the silent man, but a different human, a young one, barely older than a teenager, with short cropped hair and a steady gaze. There was an aura of calm around him, as if he had already seen the vastness of the universe and accepted it. Captain Kor, the young man said, his voice quiet but firm. I've been assigned to give you a tour. The commander believes you might be ready to see more. Tour, Kor muttered, still rubbing his temples as if trying to shake off the disorienting fog in his mind. Of what? Your prison? The young man didn't flinch. Not exactly, but you'll need to see it with your own eyes. Come on. Kor eyed him warily but had little choice. He followed the young human through the ship, and as they moved down the long hallways, Kor couldn't help but notice the complete lack of guards. It was as though the ship itself was alive, watching him, its corridors smooth and immaculate, unlike the rusted, worn-down ships he was used to commanding. Finally, they arrived at a large, circular chamber. In the center stood a massive hollow table projecting a map of the galaxy. But this wasn't any ordinary star chart. It was a map that seemed to pulse with life, with regions glowing and shifting in ways that defied logic. What's this? Kor asked, stepping closer to the table. The young man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the map. This is the network we've uncovered. The Federation's reach isn't just physical, it's conceptual. What you're seeing is the actual topology of reality itself. Time, space, matter, all interconnected. This is how we maintain order. This is how we protect the galaxy. Kor blinked, his mind struggling to keep up. You're telling me you control all of it? The young man gave a slight nod. Not control, understand. We don't dominate space or time like you might think. We've learned to move within it, bend it, see it in ways that aren't immediately visible to most civilizations. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle in. We know how the universe truly works, Captain, and we protect it from those who would destroy it. Kor's stomach twisted as the words sunk in. It felt as if the young man were speaking a language that Kor's mind couldn't fully comprehend, a kind of truth that resonated deep within him, even as he resisted it. Why show me this? Kor demanded. trying to regain control of his own thoughts. What does any of this have to do with me? You've seen the damage, the destruction that comes when beings like you and your crew tear through space, leaving chaos behind. The young man's eyes were serious. You've always taken, Captain, but there are things in this universe that even you can't take without consequence. You've trespassed into a place where the fabric of reality is delicate, and now you've seen what happens when you push too hard. Kor gritted his teeth. You think I'm the problem? That I'm just some dumb pirate who doesn't understand anything? The young man didn't respond immediately. He just watched Kor, as if weighing him. Finally, he spoke again. No, I think you're a survivor. But the question is, will you keep surviving, or will you learn to be something more? Before Kor could respond, a new voice interrupted, sharp and commanding. Captain Kor, I see you've made yourself comfortable. The woman from before, the one who had captured him, entered the room, flanked by several others, humans who looked calm and confident, as if they had seen it all before. Commander, the young man said, stepping aside. The woman nodded. You've seen the surface now, but there's more we need to show you. Kor turned to face her, his frustration mounting. I'm not some naive fool. You know, I've lived my life on my terms. I don't need your lectures. The woman's eyes softened, but there was no pity there, just a deep understanding that made Kor feel even more exposed. You misunderstand, Captain, she said. This isn't a lecture. It's an invitation. You can leave this place, go back to your crew, your ships, your rating, but there's something waiting for you out there, something bigger than you. It always has been, and you can either continue as you have, doomed to repeat the same endless cycle, or you can join us. We can teach you the ways of the universe. We can show you what lies beyond your petty desires for gold and fame. Kor's heart hammered in his chest, his mind torn between anger and something else, something like curiosity, like a small spark of hope. He had spent so long as a pirate, taking from the galaxy what he wanted, but in this place, surrounded by beings who saw the universe not as something to exploit but to understand, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice quieter now, almost unsure. The woman smiled, as if she had been waiting for him to ask. We want you to choose, Captain. The universe is vast, and your actions ripple through it, but you can decide which ripples you make. You can choose to be part of the old ways, or you can choose to help shape the future. Kor stood there, staring at her, his mind racing. The universe, the real universe, was so much larger than he had ever imagined. But what was he willing to give up to understand it? The decision wasn't an easy one. In fact, it was the hardest he had ever made. But as the chamber pulsed around him, he knew one thing for sure. His life as a pirate, that life, was over. What came next, he couldn't yet see, but for the first time, he was ready to look beyond the horizon. And so, Kor made his choice. I'm listening, he said. And for the first time in his life, Captain Kor wasn't just a pirate. He was something more, something that could change the fate of the galaxy itself. When pirates entered restricted space, they couldn't believe their eyes. Best HFY Stories, Part 4. Captain Kor stood in the heart of the Federation's ship, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the vast holographic map. The glowing threads of space and time twinkled before him like an intricately woven tapestry, each part connected in ways that seemed unfathomable. The Federation's offer was an open door, and Kor, for the first time in his life, felt an overwhelming urge to step through it. He had spent years as a pirate, raiding, plundering, running, always on the move, always surviving, but never truly understanding the cosmos he roamed. The humans before him, with their strange power and knowledge, had just opened a new door, and he could either walk through it or remain where he had always been, chasing shadows. The woman who had first spoken to him, Commander Lyra, stood beside him now, her calm demeanor betraying nothing of her thoughts. You've made a difficult choice, she said, her voice steady. The path ahead isn't easy. There will be tests, challenges. The galaxy won't simply accept your change of heart. Kor didn't flinch. His decision had been made, but the weight of it still felt heavy. I've spent my life taking what I wanted. I've fought for every scrap, every victory, but I'm starting to realize that there's more than just surviving. There's understanding. Lyra's lips curved into a small, approving smile. Understanding. Exactly. That's the first step. They walked toward a set of doors at the far end of the room, and Core followed without hesitation. The sleek, metallic surface parted silently as they entered a new chamber, one that seemed to pulse with energy. It was a control room, but not like any Core had seen before. At the center of the room was a giant crystalline structure, humming softly. Around it, several humans, each with a quiet intensity in their eyes, worked with what seemed like an effortless synchronization. This is the Nexus, Lyra explained, stepping to the side. It's the heart of our understanding, our connection to the fabric of the universe. Core stared at the crystal, his pulse quickening. The Nexus was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Its surface shimmered and shifted, as if the crystal itself was alive. It seemed to bend the very air around it, distorting the space inside the room. What is it? Core asked, stepping closer. It's not a weapon, if that's what you're thinking, Lyra replied, her tone almost amused. It's a tool, a way of observing and interacting with the fundamental laws of reality. The Federation discovered it long before we unified the galaxy. It's how we learned to see the unseen, to bend time, to understand the flow of space. Core's mind was reeling. You control time? Space? How is that possible? Lyra nodded. Not control, Captain. Understand. Once you grasp the true nature of the universe, you can see things differently. You can manipulate the flow of energy, the motion of stars, the dance of particles, without lifting a finger. His breath caught. He had always thought of the universe as something to conquer, something to tame. But now, he was learning that there was a far deeper level of interaction, a way to coexist, not just dominate. The Federation's purpose, Lyra continued, isn't to rule, it's to guide, to protect the balance of the galaxy, to ensure that those with the power to shape space don't misuse it. Core turned back to the Nexus. He felt drawn to it, as if it was calling him, pulling him in. And this is how you protect it? Exactly. The Nexus allows us to see everything, the entire galaxy, all the forces at play, the paths of destiny intertwining. But we don't make the choices for others, we guide them. The galaxy is too vast, too interconnected for any one force to dominate without consequence. Core thought of his life, of the countless raids, the ships he had stolen, the destruction he had wrought. He had been a small piece in a much larger game, never seeing the true scope of his actions. I've taken lives. I've torn apart families. I've stolen what didn't belong to me. Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time, Core saw something like sympathy in her eyes. You were part of a system that used violence to gain power. But you've seen what's beyond that. You know there's a better way. Core clenched his fists. I don't know if I'm ready to take on all of this. He gestured vaguely toward the Nexus. This isn't some simple pirate mission. This is everything. The whole galaxy, all at once. We don't ask you to carry the weight of the galaxy alone, Lyra said. You'll be trained. You'll learn to see the universe not through violence, but through understanding. This will take time. And yes, there will be challenges, but you won't face them alone. Core was silent for a long moment, his mind working through the possibilities. This wasn't just a chance for survival. This was an opportunity to be part of something larger than himself, something that could make a true difference in the galaxy. I've always been a loner, he said finally, his voice quieter than before. A pirate, but maybe I can do more. Lyra nodded approvingly. The first step is always the hardest, Captain, but you've made it, and from here on, we'll work together. As Core looked around at the humans working in perfect harmony, tapping into the immense power of the Nexus, he couldn't help but feel a stirring of awe. He had entered the restricted zone with the goal of raiding for treasure. Now, he was on the verge of something far more profound, a chance to help shape the future, to play a role in the preservation of the very fabric of reality itself. The universe was vast and mysterious, but it was no longer something he sought to conquer. For the first time, Core understood that the true treasure wasn't gold or weapons, it was knowledge, understanding. And with that, the former pirate Captain Core stepped into a new life, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian of the galaxy, ready to learn, ready to grow, and ready to be part of something greater than anything he had ever dreamed of. The universe had opened its doors to him, and for the first time, Captain Core didn't just want to survive. He wanted to shape the future. When pirates entered restricted space, They couldn't believe their eyes. Best HFY Stories, Part 5. Weeks passed since Captain Kor made his fateful decision. The Federation, true to their word, didn't abandon him to the whims of his old life. They guided him, educated him, and slowly, he began to change. The lessons he received were far beyond anything he had ever imagined. The training wasn't easy, but it was transformative. Every day, Kor learned something new. The Nexus was more than just a tool, it was a doorway to understanding. He could feel its power when he was near it. A low hum of energy that vibrated in his bones. It wasn't about bending space and time to his will. It was about seeing the invisible threads that connected everything, the way every star, every planet, every life form, was intertwined in an intricate web of existence. The Federation's teaching was clear. Knowledge wasn't to be wielded for dominance. It was to be shared, protected, and preserved. Kor spent hours studying with the human mentors, learning the philosophy that lay at the heart of the Federation's mission. They were not conquerors, they were keepers. They didn't impose their will on the galaxy. They harmonized with it, ensuring that no one or no race could unbalance the delicate equilibrium of space. There were no borders between their race and others. Everyone, human, alien, or otherwise, was given the chance to contribute to the grand design of the cosmos. One afternoon, Kor stood in the center of the Federation's grand training hall, his eyes fixed on a vast projection of the galaxy. His hand hovered above the glowing interface as he traced the paths of ships, the migration patterns of civilizations, and the ancient corridors of energy that formed the very fabric of space itself. It was as if the universe had finally revealed itself to him, and he was beginning to understand how everything worked. "You're doing well, Captain," a voice interrupted, and Kor turned to see Lyra standing at the entrance. Her expression was warm, but there was still a distant authority in her eyes. "I'm impressed." Kor offered a slight smile. "I'm still learning. Everyone does, even we don't know everything, but you're starting to see it, the way it all fits together." Kor glanced at the projection again. He was beginning to feel it, the hum of the galaxy, the pulse of life that surged through every star and every system. He wasn't just watching it anymore. He was feeling it. He could sense the tiny disturbances in the fabric of reality, the way energy flowed from one place to another, the way civilizations expanded or shrank based on their decisions. It was intoxicating. "But I still don't get it," Kor said, frowning. "I understand the theory. I understand that it's not about conquering. It's about preserving. But what happens when there's a threat? What happens when someone actively tries to tear the fabric apart?" Lyra's gaze sharpened, and for the first time, Kor could see the full weight of responsibility in her eyes. "The Federation's role isn't to prevent conflict, Captain. That's a part of life. But when conflict arises, when a civilization or a being decides to go against the natural flow of the universe, then we act, not to destroy, but to redirect the energy, to guide them back onto the right path." Kor nodded slowly, his mind turning over the possibilities. He had been a pirate, a destroyer, a taker. The idea of redirecting violence, of preserving life and balance rather than just annihilating the enemy, felt strange but oddly satisfying. "That's what you've been training me for," Kor said, more to himself than to Lyra. "Not to fight, but to stop destruction before it happens." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes steady. "Yes, we can't just wait for the galaxy to fall apart, Captain. Every action we take creates ripples, every decision, every shift in energy. It's not about being passive. It's about being proactive, understanding how to shape the outcome, not just react to it." Kor looked out at the galaxy again, his fingers hovering over the interface as if he could reach out and touch the stars. "I've spent my life running, stealing, surviving," he said, his voice quieter now. "But I've never really understood the consequences. I've never seen how small my actions were, how connected everything is. I thought I was a force to be reckoned with. Now, I see the truth. I was just a tiny fragment of something much larger." Lyra smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. "You've made great progress, and you're not alone. The Federation will stand by you, but you must stand by us when the time comes." Kor's gaze hardened slightly. "And when will that time come?" "Sooner than you think," Lyra said, her voice growing serious. "There are whispers in the galaxy, Captain, forces that seek to disrupt the balance. We've sensed a disturbance, a rip in the fabric. We need every hand we can get. A ripple of tension passed through Kor's chest. The same thrill of action that he had once felt when preparing for a raid now surged again. But this time, it was not out of greed or violence. It was a call to protect, to preserve the very fabric of the universe he had only just begun to understand. "What's the situation?" Kor asked, his old instincts kicking in. "A new player," Lyra said, her voice low. "A rogue faction, one that believes the galaxy should be ruled by strength alone. They don't understand the balance. They want to break the Nexus, tear apart what we've built, and they'll do anything to accomplish that." Kor clenched his fists, his mind already racing. This wasn't a fight for treasure or glory. This was about something far greater, about ensuring the survival of everything he had come to understand. "I'm in," he said, his voice resolute. "Whatever it takes." Lyra gave a small nod. "I thought you would be." As the door to the training hall slid open, Kor followed her down a long corridor toward the Federation's command center. He could feel the tension rising around him, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing after an enemy for the sake of loot. He was preparing for something much larger, a fight to protect the galaxy, to preserve the balance that the Federation had fought so hard to maintain. This was no longer about surviving. This was about defending the universe from those who would shatter it. And Captain Kor, once a pirate, now stood ready to do whatever it took to ensure the galaxy's future was safe. When pirates entered restricted space, they couldn't believe their eyes. Best HFY Stories, Part 6. The command center was alive with activity. Holographic displays flickered across the walls, casting blue light on the faces of the Federation officers who moved with quiet precision. Their eyes focused on the complex data streams that filled the room. Kor stood at the edge of it all, feeling like a stranger in a strange land, though the growing sense of purpose in his chest told him this was where he belonged. For once, his instincts were not telling him to run or fight. He was here to protect, to hold back the tide of destruction. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze steady as she observed the flow of information. "The situation is dire," she said, her voice low but firm. "The rogue faction is known as the Voidborn. They operate on the fringes of known space, and they've been gathering strength. They've intercepted several Federation communications, and we believe they are preparing to attack the Nexus." Kor's hand tightened around the rail in front of him. "The Nexus? They want to destroy it?" Lyra nodded. "The Voidborn believe that power lies only in the destruction of everything. They seek to break the delicate fabric of reality itself, to plunge the galaxy into chaos, and rebuild it in their image. They think they can control it, reshape everything with raw force." Kor's lips curled into a tight frown. "Sounds familiar." "Yes," Lyra said, her eyes meeting his. "They are the kind of force you once were, chaotic, destructive, driven by ego. But they have something we don't understand yet, something powerful enough to threaten the stability of the Nexus itself. If they succeed, the consequences will be catastrophic. Time, space, and reality could begin to unravel." The weight of her words settled over him like a cold shroud. The Nexus was more than just a symbol of Federation power. It was the key to understanding the universe's structure, its very foundation. Without it, the galaxy would fall into a kind of unpredictable entropy. No civilization, no species, could survive the unraveling. "So, what's the plan?" Kor asked, his voice steady, his mind already calculating the steps. His life had always been about action, instinct, speed, and aggression, but now, he had a new kind of focus, a different kind of fight. "We will intercept them before they can reach the Nexus," Lyra said, turning to a nearby officer. The officer nodded and began manipulating the controls, bringing up a new holographic display, a detailed map of the galaxy. The Voidborn's fleet was clearly marked, just at the edge of Federation space, making their move toward a cluster of stars where the Nexus was located. Kor's eyes narrowed. "That's too close. We can't let them get any further." "We're assembling a fleet," Lyra said, her voice cold with determination. "But we'll need someone to infiltrate their command ship. We believe that's where the heart of their power lies, their leader. A being known only as the Exiled One. We need to know what they're planning, and we need to stop them from activating whatever device they have. This is where you come in, Captain." Kor's pulse quickened at the mention of infiltration. It was a kind of mission he was familiar with, though this time the stakes were much higher than raiding a well-guarded cargo hold. I'm your man, he said, without hesitation. Lyra gave a single, approving nod. Good. You'll be dropped on their ship, and you'll have one chance to gather intel, disable their systems, and, if necessary, stop the exiled one from using whatever they've built to breach the Nexus. Kor studied the map again. The map of the Voidborn fleet slowly advancing, their ships appearing like shadows on the screen. How many ships are we up against? Enough to cause significant damage, Lyra replied. But we have an advantage. The Voidborn are unpredictable. They think only in terms of destruction. They've underestimated the Federation's power and unity. We can outmaneuver them. But we can't underestimate them either, Kor said, a hint of his old instincts flaring up. If they've got something capable of breaching the Nexus, we need to be careful. I've seen what happens when someone doesn't understand the balance of power. If we go in blind, it's going to cost us. Lyra's expression hardened. I trust you know the risks, Captain. But this is no longer about survival. This is about protecting everything. Kor's eyes flicked to the holographic map once more, his fingers brushing over the controls as he zoomed in on the Voidborn fleet. The Exiled One's flagship, a massive, jagged vessel, loomed large at the center of the fleet. From this distance, Kor could almost feel the malevolent energy radiating off it. He had fought battles before, but this felt different. It was no longer about taking what wasn't his. It was about making sure that nothing could destroy the fragile peace the Federation had fought to build. We go in fast, Kor said, a plan already forming in his mind. I'll board their ship and gather what we need. Once I've got the intel, we'll disable their main weapons and systems. Then, we hit them hard. Lyra nodded again. Good. We'll give you cover. But you'll have to move quickly. We don't know what kind of resistance you'll face inside their ship, but expect heavy combat. Kor met her eyes, the weight of responsibility settling fully on his shoulders. I've fought in plenty of boardings before. This won't be the first time I've taken down a ship. And with that, the final preparations began. Kor was briefed on the mission details, what to expect, what he had to accomplish, and how to signal for extraction. He would have only one shot. There were no do-overs when it came to preventing the destruction of the Nexus. No second chances. He donned his Federation-issued suit, its sleek black and silver design feeling alien against the rough, weathered leather of his pirate garb. But this wasn't just about clothes, it was about purpose. He was no longer a pirate. He was a protector. The Federation fleet, with its impressive array of ships, moved into position, surrounding the Voidborn fleet in the darkness of space. It was a tense moment, a quiet before the storm. Kor stood at the ready on the transport shuttle, the hum of the engines vibrating through his body. A soft voice came through his earpiece, and it was Lyra, calm and resolute. Captain, it's time. Remember what you're fighting for. Kor glanced at the view through the shuttle's viewport. The Voidborn flagship loomed ahead. His fingers tightened around his blaster. I'm ready, he said. The shuttle rocketed forward, a comet of light cutting through the void. And Captain Kor, once a pirate, now a defender of the galaxy, made his way toward the heart of the storm.